Hi, this is Helen from the Heart of Hospice podcast. November is National Hospice and Palliative Care Month and also National Family Caregivers Month. In recognition, we're featuring a lineup of guests that includes a millennial caregiver, a palliative care chaplain, a hospice nurse who's a TikTok influencer, and a palliative care physician turned documentary filmmaker. Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, there's something to learn and something to inspire you. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Heart of Hospice podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services. When you need information about hospice, Hospice Navigation Services is here to help. An expert navigator will answer your questions about end-of-life care and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care. It's your journey. We can be your guide. Visit hospicenavigation.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today.
Interdisciplinary teams are the foundation of hospice care. Dr. Jessica Zitter is here today to discuss how that team collaboration creates the kind of care that seriously ill patients and their caregivers need. Jessica Zitter is a documentary filmmaker, a writer, a physician, and founder of Real Medicine Media. It's a nonprofit devoted to using story to transform and humanize medical culture. Dr. Zitter is the primary featured subject and a member of the team that created the Oscar and Emmy-nominated Netflix documentary Extremis. She went on to direct and produce the award-winning documentary Caregiver, A Love Story back in 2020, which examines the growing crisis of family caregiver burden in the United States. Her third film, The Chaplain and the Doctor, is coming out in 2025. It explores the transformative relationship between a hospital chaplain and a physician, challenging the fragmented clinical approach to patient care. Dr. Zitter's book, Extreme Measures, Finding a Better Path to the End of Life, describes her evolution from a doctor focused on extending life at all costs to one who was more patient-centered and humanistic. Dr. Zitter practiced the unusual combination of critical care alongside palliative care out in Oakland, California. To start this interview, I asked Dr. Zitter to tell me one word that describes how she feels about her work. You're going to love her answer. Jessica and I talk about interdisciplinary teams, how they function, and how much she has learned and grown from working with chaplains and social workers. You can find Dr. Jessica Zitter at realmedicinemedia.org, and that's REEL medicinemedia.org. You can also text the word caring to 66866 to subscribe to their newsletter, or you can subscribe on the website. And if you're interested in her latest film, The Chaplain and the Doctor, you can find it at thechaplainandthedoctor.com. There's a lot to learn in this interview. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Jessica Zitter. Jessica, welcome back to the podcast. It's great to have you back on the show.
Such an honor to be here with you.
Oh, I always love our conversations. You've been on the show a couple of times, and it's like having a friend back on. So I'm glad to have you back with me.
Oh, thanks so much, Helen.
Well, we're going to start with an icebreaker just for fun. I want you to use one word. Give me one word to describe how you feel about the work that you do.
Oh, can I ask which work? My doctoring work, my filmmaking work, my...
Oh. I'm going to say your caregiving advocacy work.
My caregiving advocacy work. I'll tell you, just on a personal level, I have, as I told you earlier, 2 to 3 people pretty much every week, different people, rotating cast of characters of family and friends who are completely overwhelmed by their caregiving tasks. These are people with very large amounts of education, reasonable, financial situation, and they're all completely overwhelmed. So I am very inspired. I'm very excited to be able to provide support to them, even if it's just emotional support, given how little actual support there is out there.
Yeah, I love that. So we'll say your words inspired. I like that.
Right.
I like that. I like that. If you can be inspired by your work, that's what keeps us going on a regular basis. I think that's what people don't realize about healthcare people that work in these hard areas, these silos of end of life and palliative care and serious illness. Yeah, those stories keep us going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Not to get too dark, but there really is a crisis amongst healthcare providers right now. Certainly spiked during COVID, but it was always there and it was building. And it's just really a problem that we need to be addressing and calling out.
It is. It is. It's a big conversation. And I'm glad that we get a chance to talk about it and to amplify that kind of advocacy here. So we're going to use some big numbers today. Unfortunately, some horrifyingly large numbers. Probably the last time I talked to you, we had 54 million approximately unpaid family caregivers in the U.S. Statistics from this new year, from 2025, show that there are now 63 million caregivers across the United States. That's a horrifying number. What do you think has created this? How did we get to this?
Well, I think it's a structural situation that is simply, it's in place and it can't get any better. I mean, we've got smaller families, we've got dispersed families, we've got, people people splitting up families, divorces, et cetera. And it's just not the way it used to be when there were 7 or 8 kids and an intact family and people lived next door. Now care is falling onto the shoulders of 1, maybe 2 people. And that doesn't even include the actual support of all the physical work that needs to be done to maintain a person. This is just the worry and the sort of economic support. So we really have a deficit in support for patients who need care.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. So I'm a caregiver for my mom. And every time I talk to my brother who takes the lead on her care, we say, thank goodness we have each other. We have no idea how people who are on their own do this, or people who are working, because my brother's retired. Yeah, it's an overwhelming job. And right now we're not actually providing any physical care for my mother.
Right. Absolutely. Is she in a facility or?
Yeah, she's in an assisted living. So she's got the physical help. And fortunately, she has the finances to live there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the stress of caregiving from a distance is actually not trivial. In fact, they say that caregivers who live at a distance end up spending more of their own money than people who live close by. So there are more stressors of different sorts on people who provide care from a distance.
That's true. We think of remote caregiving as caregiving light, caregiving-ish. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I've even had patients where the primary caregiver, the only caregiver, lived at a distance. Yeah. There's a special set of stressors that comes with that. So I want to back up a little bit and talk about your films, right? You were part of Extremis back in 2016, a wonderful film, very huge accolades, very well received, very well respected. How has your work changed as a physician since 2016?
Well, I'd say that the biggest change is that I've become a filmmaker. And in fact, I just finished my third film. So, Extremis was my first inspiration, and I went and got this director, and he came in and made this film, which really, I think, got to the issues that I think about a lot, the things that I wrote about in my book that just came out right around the same time. And it really, by making a film or by writing essays or articles, you start to really think about things in a more structured way instead of letting things just be kind of that's the way they are. And I think it brings in more thoughtful evaluations of how you're functioning in a system that's not really working. So, Extremis really changed my understanding of communicating in the intensive care unit, how important it is to break bad news and how hard it is. The second film, Caregiver: A Love Story, again challenged my ideas of who is the important person. Is it the patient, or is it actually the caregiver, or is it both as a unit? And I really think that film raised my awareness about this issue of caregiver burden that I honestly hadn't really thought about much before. And this third film is again a product of raising my awareness of something that I didn't really understand, which is how incredibly common and easy and prevalent it is to bring biases and labels into the care of your patients. You come in and you're like, we doctors, right? Click, click, click. Oh, that's that kind of patient. That patient has this problem. You'd oftentimes, before we've even met them, we kind of think we need to synthesize things really quickly. And the problem is that we end up telling a story in our own heads or to our colleagues about who this patient is before we've even met them. And so that's something I've become, again, very attuned to as a part of making this film.
I think that's very important. And I love that has come to your awareness, because I think it brings a value that not all of us in healthcare have come to realize, that when you read a medical record, say the patient's got lung cancer, first thing you automatically think is this patient's a smoker, they're responsible for their own illness.
Absolutely.
Right. And we'd like to say that we're not like that, but we know we are. We know we are. We filter according to those labels, and we assign, and we write the story before we're even told what it is.
And we're all really well-meaning. I mean, we're coming into healthcare because we care about people. We want to help. We're healers, and we don't realize how that sort of that tendency of the human brain, which is common and prevalent, to categorize things. It's like we're on the savannah. We have to make quick judgments, right? Well, the problem is when we do that in a hospital environment, we can really harm people and cause profound harm that we're seeing about in journals and journal articles all over the place. Rising numbers of really serious problems with implicit bias around racism, around gender preference, around age, around ability to do things, and physical disability. So patients of all sorts, and that's just a small number of identities or factors about a patient that could get them having bias against them. The problem is there's so many more that are ephemeral that we don't even have a name for. Not about race, but about your personality. Someone doesn't like you. You look like their uncle that they couldn't stand. I mean, there are so many reasons why people are going to come at you with a story in their head that will end up very likely impacting your care.
Yeah, totally true. And, community-based care is the same thing. So I remember you get a face sheet on a patient and you look at their address and you go, that's a bad part of town.
Right.
These people are uneducated. They probably don't have a lot of money, probably haven't taken care of their healthcare needs like they should have, et cetera. And it's all just these preconceived notions that we assign.
Or a patient comes into the hospital in shackles and you assume they're a bad person.
Right.
I wrote an article in 2020 called I can't remember what it's called. I can give you the link to it later, but it basically talks about how shackles, a person being in shackles, which is not an uncommon thing in a public hospital, can really impact your comfort level with them. It can impact your feeling of safety, taking care of them. It can impact how close you want to come to them. It can impact how curious you are about them as a person. And I think, having a cop sitting outside the door with a gun in a holster it really impacts the way the healthcare provider comes into the room. Not for good.
Yeah. I remember having a patient that had just been released from the penitentiary here. in the local area. And knowing that he had been incarcerated and just released, definitely, that was a huge, huge topic of conversation throughout the team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it had to affect the way we treated him.
Of course.
Absolutely it did.
And that's the thing about this film. What I'm hoping that this film is going to do is again, most of my films are about relationships and about people. So you see in this film, me and this chaplain who are from very, very different worlds, both professionally and personally. And, she kind of comes in and there's this moment in our 15-year relationship, a few years in, where she basically accuses me of being biased against a patient. And I am like, what are you talking about? I'm here. I'm working in a public hospital. I care about people. I'm a good guy. And I got very defensive. And that's how I usually that's how it was with Pat Murphy in Extremis, right? The nurse who accused me of torturing a patient. These are the kinds of things that make me stop and say, wait a minute, change of plan, change of business as usual. Let me see what I'm missing. And so that's what happened there. And I started to really look into the bias that was all around me and in my own head and how it was impacting the way I interacted with my patients. And I realized, I am a good guy. I'm doing my best. And the truth is, this is just a function of how my brain works and how people are since time immemorial. And I don't want this to be a finger wagging thing at all. It's not about wagging fingers. It's about saying, let's acknowledge something that happens, and then let's figure out what we want to do about it. And I think most people like me are very well-meaning and just haven't realized this. And I think if we start to call it out and start to realize what's going on, we're going to be much more attuned to the issues and more likely to change our behavior.
Yeah. We have to be able to be held accountable. I think that's important. But if you have a brain, you have a bias. That's just the way humans are wired.
That's right.
Yeah. So your co-star, if I can use that word, is a chaplain, which I absolutely love because, we've been talking about all these labels and biases that we have. Religion, faith, spiritual beliefs, that's a big one. That is a big one. And especially here in the part of Texas where I live and the community that I work with, we see that a lot. And healthcare providers struggle with reserving their personal faith beliefs for themselves and not imposing them, the redeeming, saving, proselytizing. That happens pretty frequently, much more frequently than we would like to admit.
100%, 100%. I think that is a really important point. I once had a friend of mine who works in hospice. I don't even know if you know her. Her name is Cynthia Perilliot. She's amazing. She does incredible work trying to bring hospice to communities of color. She's an African-American woman. She lived in, was it Detroit? I think it was Detroit, and her father was dying. And this was in the 80s, and he was or maybe the 90s, and he got hospice support. And she's become this incredible advocate for bringing hospice to the African-American community. She's like, why are there no Black people getting hospice? So she's done incredible work around that. And we've become friends. And she said to me once, so I want to ask you something. Do you think that when you hear that people are religious, does that make you feel like they are maybe not as smart, or like they're not going to listen to you? And I was like listening to that saying, wow, let me think about that. Like, these are things that I think could potentially be biases that healthcare providers have. People who don't necessarily pray themselves might think, oh, a praying person is this type of person, whatever that might be in your brain.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an interesting perspective. So you've got a chaplain that works with you. I love that you chose a chaplain. I love that. And a female.
I didn't choose her. I did not choose her. She chose me. I did not choose her.
She chose you. I like that even better. That says something really nice about you.
Oh,
I think. So tell me about the film.
Well, first of all, just to tell you about our relationship, I was not looking for a relationship with a chaplain. Absolutely no interest in chaplaincy. I was like, oh, that's nice. You're part of the team. We're an interprofessional team. You do the praying, I do the doctoring. And I think you can imagine which part I thought was more important. And that's the way our healthcare system works, our healthcare culture, and it's also the way our culture works in general. There are things that are ranked higher, right? Being a swaggering surgeon is ranked higher than being a chaplain. And I'm somewhere in the middle of that, right? So I was really not thinking she had anything to teach me. And, she could do her work. And I'm sure there were some patients who needed to pray and et cetera. So I was I'm embarrassed about this. I was very dismissive. I wasn't even actively dismissive. I just wasn't thinking much about what she was doing. And she basically called me out one day, as I said to you. We were talking about a patient, our whole team, and I wasn't the person who said this word, gangbanger. It was a guy who'd come in and gotten shot, but the word got used around the table. And even though I wasn't the one who said it, I accepted it as fact. Oh, this is this kind of person. And Betty basically sat at the table, and all of a sudden she looked up and she said, "You don't know this man. You're giving him this label without even having laid eyes on him." And she said, "That's racist."
Oh, snap.
Yeah, snap. And I got very defensive, as did the other people on the team. I said, I was like, "Betty, not everything's about race," because she talks a lot about race. And I was just, I'm a person who doesn't see color. I come into that. These are all the things that we well-intentioned people think to ourselves. We don't think of ourselves as biased. We don't think of ourselves as racist. And the fact is, we have to look a little bit more carefully. The fact that we would accept that just because a young man got shot and he's African American, that he must be a thug is a problem. It's a problem. And by the way, even if he did do something criminal, which by the way, this man did not, it doesn't matter. You cannot judge people before you've met them. And so that was a really difficult moment, but it was the moment that I needed to stop and say, "Oh my gosh, I think I've missed something here." And that went on to create another, an 11 or 12-year relationship going forward. We've been working together for 15 years, but it was a few years until I really started to understand all of the weird cultural things that my brain was enmeshed in, the hierarchy, the bias, all of those things. And Betty really helped me to see that, number one, that existed, it was happening. Number two, it was harmful. And number three, I didn't want to be that way. And so the next many years is an ongoing, continuing growth, personal growth that Betty has really helped me to do. I think I've helped her to do her own growth, and we are truly, deeply professional colleagues and mutually educating colleagues and friends. And that's what this film is about. And you can really see that in the relationship that develops over the course of the film.
Tell me about Betty's approach to patients. What is she like?
Well, originally, there was going to be like a subtitle to the film. Everybody has a story. She always says that everyone has a story. Make sure you get the story. It's always about the story. And again, I had a pretty sort of two-dimensional approach to getting the story. I made up the story much of the time based on a few labels and pieces of facts, quote unquote, that I had. And I made up the story, and that's the story that stuck with me most of the time that the patient was in the hospital. And with Betty, especially when I really started to be with her, be next to her, be at her side, and listen to how she approached patients, I realized so many things about how we need to be as human beings, and the curiosity that is required, and the compassion, and the finding commonalities, really critically important information. Like, what about your cat? Well, I have a cat too. When you find things that connect you to somebody else, there's so many totally, completely different variables of things that can connect you to another person. You need to hang on to those things. You need to find them. You need to delve into what they may be. You need to investigate and ask questions. And something happens, something magical happens when you do that. And it's certainly good for the patient, and it's really good for the healthcare provider. And we talked originally about this crisis of burnout. And I think in so many ways, it's pulled me back to the purpose of why I came into this. And it's made me feel more intentional and more of a healer. And I really thank Betty for that.
That's wonderful. Now that is how an interdisciplinary team
Yes,
is supposed to work.
that's exactly right. And I will say to all of the well-meaning people in palliative care that I would challenge them. I know I can certainly challenge myself to say, we can give lip service to the concept of an interprofessional team, interdisciplinary, interprofessional. They're kind of aligned, although they're slightly different. But is it really happening? Or is it happening in every case? I'm sure some places really are more interprofessional, but I do think there's still a hierarchy in the world of palliative care, in the world of hospice, where there is this ranking of who does what that's more important. What is the most important thing? Well, the most important thing is the medicine, right? Is the body. It's
Right.
pain medicine, pain management, by the way, is extremely important. And maybe you rank that higher. I do agree with that. But I will say that a lot of the time, Betty's the person who realizes or finds out that the patient's in pain. So it doesn't just mean that you know how to prescribe a medication that addresses pain. It's the curiosity about it. It's the non-assumption about it. Because a lot of times people have pain and people kind of, oh God, this guy's asking for more pain medicine. But
Yeah.
Betty comes in and she really is somebody who's very, very important on the team in terms of addressing and managing pain. And so I think pain is a really, really high thing for us to be worried about, but doesn't mean that the doctor is the only person who does it. Yeah, they know more, maybe more about the pharmacology and about writing the orders, but we're a team that should come together to think about pain.
Well, pain transcends the just the physical body, right? There's spiritual pain, total pain. This was that's Dame Cicely Saunders' concept.
100%.
Yeah, that goes back to our roots quite a bit.
Right. And I want to say, a big part of this film, it's, as I mentioned, it's a lot about implicit bias. It's really about questioning the way that our brains work and really trying to substitute more in the story and the curiosity. But another piece of this film, obviously, the chaplain and the doctor, is talking about how we do not bring spirituality in any kind of really intentional, continuous way into the care of our patients. We still think of it, I think, as somewhat less important, and we're not addressing it. And I cannot even count anymore the number of times that we thought somebody had physical pain and it really did turn out to be spiritual pain. And Betty's the person who found that out.
This is why we listen. This is why we have every discipline that we do on the team. And they're so vital. I love it.
And we have to respect each one of them and work together to bring all of our different expertise together to do the best thing for the patient.
Right. I think nurses' aides are probably the most overlooked, right? Because so for listeners that don't really understand how interdisciplinary teams function to take care of the business of managing our patients, we meet every couple of weeks or every week to discuss patients. But that's the physician, the nurse, the social worker, and the chaplain. It's very rare that our aides are included in those meetings. However, they spend the most time, they have more visits, they know the patients more intimately in a very personal way. They hear about problems that the patients won't tell other people. They see a lot of times the first signs of abuse, the first signs of neglect. The first signs that a patient is actively dying. And I have had numerous patients who died in the arms of their aides while they were receiving their bath that day.
Oh, wow.
That's very common. So to overlook and say, here's the hierarchy and the aides are down at the bottom, that's just a waste of talent and skill and compassion.
Absolutely. But I will say one more thing that Betty says all the time. It's really important that we provide the space for them, but also that they step in if it's possible, because of course you can't step in if there's an iron wall around the team.
Right.
So it's really important, as Betty says all the time, that chaplains also understand how critically important it is that they step in. And the thing about Betty is that nothing really seems to scare her. She's a lot more brave than I am. And she says what she needs to say. She never questions whether or not she should say something that she believes should be said. So she speaks truth to power. She speaks truth to hierarchy. She doesn't sit like a wallflower, and she wants chaplains to do that also in general, like her.
Yeah.
And I think that's doable. I think if people hear from someone like Betty, I think it builds confidence in this system where chaplains aren't given their due. I think that hearing from someone like Betty, who has successfully put herself into the team in a more egalitarian way, I think that can be really helpful to other chaplains. I will tell you that what you said before is exactly right. Like, there's a scene in the film where there's a woman that we meet who has terrible sickle cell disease. And she's not a patient. She's the sister of one of our patients at a funeral that Betty's leading for this patient. But she says, she starts asking me about, well, can you tell me where the best place is to go get my, treatment for my sickle cell? And then Betty steps in. Betty, of course, is a sickle cell organizer in Oakland. And she starts giving her information about what she should do and where she should go, stuff that I did not know. And at one point, then this woman says to her, I have so much trouble coming into the hospital. I come in and they make me feel like a drug addict. And I would never have heard those words. Who's going to say that? What patient is going to say that to a doctor? You're making me feel like a drug addict. Who's going to say that? The only reason I heard those words was because Betty was right there and she was talking to Betty. And that's why you're right. I mean, the nursing assistant, the end of life doula, the chaplain, like, why aren't we listening to what they have observed and what they have to say? It's so valuable and so important.
So I agree with Betty. I think that the healthcare system has devalued chaplains and made them say, here's your space in the box.
Yeah.
You need to stay there. And then the clinicians are going to manage most things. You can pitch in when the patient needs some prayer.
Exactly.
So if we remind them, you have value, you are essential. We really did alienate a lot of chaplains.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of chaplains during the pandemic because they were excluded from the care of the patients, making visits, especially, community-based care.
Yeah.
But then also for chaplains to step forward, conduct themselves professionally, realize they have value, realize their voice is so necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a two-way street. Everybody has to bring respect and help to coordinate that relationship.
100%.
This conversation is so good, but we're going to take a quick break. Hang on for more great content.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services.
If you or someone you care about is dealing with a life-limiting illness, you need a guide. Hospice Navigation Services is here to help you get the best end-of-life care possible. We understand the importance of personalized, experienced support. Hospice navigators provide one-on-one support over the phone or through video calls to guide you every step of the way. They'll answer your questions, explain what hospice care looks like, and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. Whether you're planning ahead or you have an urgent need, Hospice Navigation Services helps you and your family understand your options for end-of-life care. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care and get answers to your questions. You don't have to go through this alone. You deserve compassionate support and guidance for your end-of-life experience. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. To book your hospice navigation session and receive your free guide to end-of-life care, visit our website at hospicenavigation.com. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. So I want to touch back on the last time you were with us on the podcast. It's been about 4 years since Caregiver, A Love Story came out. And we're going to switch gears, although, right, Betty and caregiving, she would probably love this conversation.
Totally.
Caregiver, A Love Story was a film about your friend Bambi and her husband Rick as they navigated her terminal cancer diagnosis and his caregiving experience. And it included all the warts and turn over the stones and see all the nasty stuff, all the fallout that comes with an illness like that, and the caregiving responsibilities. Do you think at this point, now that we have 63 million family caregivers, do you think we've been able to move the needle when it comes to supporting caregivers?
Oh, I hate to be a pessimist. No.
I mean, we're being real. We're being real in this conversation. So
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many well-meaning organizations out there that are just severely underfunded. And, in many states, there's not even a sort of Medicaid benefits to support it. I'm looking at all I can say is it's if you've got people who are very highly educated and have plenty of money and they are profoundly overwhelmed by the caregiving experience, you just can't help but wonder what the vast majority of other people are dealing with. And it's terrible. And what are your options? You keep somebody at home, get a care provider at $30 an hour, which most people simply can't afford.
Right.
Move in with your loved one who could be alive, who knows, for 10 years, or have them go to an institution, a nursing home, maybe assisted living, where they get a little bit more support. The fact is, it's just too expensive. And we don't have family resources. My friend who's a geriatrician said, you should never have fewer at any given time than 2 caregivers available for a particular patient. And I mean, what kind of family is going to have 2 people in the family who are completely dedicated to the care of a loved one? It's impossible.
Yeah. You're relying on so many things. First of all, that they're willing and they're able and they're not dispersed all over, they're not living remotely.
They don't have a job.
Right. Or children as sandwich caregivers, which
That's
is a
right.
whole subgroup of caregiving, which is a challenge. I'm with you. I don't want to be negative about the whole thing, but I think it's important to be realistic about the status of caregiving in the United States. We know there's a whole lot of those of us with gray hair that are that are heading into this system, and it's going to be completely overwhelmed.
Totally. Completely. 100%.
Yeah. So when you look back now on that experience with Bambi, you became very immersed in that. You were very much a part of knowing what their story was and being part of the story. What sticks in your mind about that experience?
Well, I wouldn't say it's about that experience, because I think that was really my first experience starting to kind of get really close and up close and personal to a caregiver. And I tell you, the beginning, when I was making the film, I didn't think the film was going to be about the caregiver. I really wanted the film to be about Bambi, because she's this compelling character. And Rick was just the guy who was going to open the door to the hospice workers, and
It's so not true.
it's so not true. And when I kind of, and there were times when he kind of complained about something, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm taking that out. That's too negative. And it was when we put the rough cut together, and I was like, oh my God, this film has to be about Rick. Rick is the person who's having the most important transition here. Bambi's dying. Bambi is dying. We know what dying is. But Rick is having this unexpected transformation, which is really, really important for us to look at. So what I would say is, yes, that was the first time I actually looked at family caregiver burden. But I will now, when you see something, you can't unsee it, right? I cannot unsee caregiver burden. And I'm going to tell you 3 times right now, I have 3 active situations with family and friends where it's impossible situations. And one of them is our cousin, and her husband has a progressive neurologic disease. And he's coming in and out of the hospital. She has 2 kids, but one of them is just graduated college, and she wants to go and live somewhere else. And what is Kim going to say? And the choices are impossible. They're impossible, and the stress is profound. And I trying to do what I can to help, but the truth is, there's nothing you can really do that's going to make any significant difference. I mean, it's a bottomless pit of need, and it's profound and horrendous. And I don't know what to say except that my heart seizes up, and that's just one of probably 4 cases that I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah, I think having these conversations still matters.
Yeah,
we know it's a huge uphill climb, right? You and I aren't going to change anything and move the needle off of 63 million just by having a conversation on a podcast.
Right.
But I think it's still worth having the conversation to acknowledge, for one thing, that even those of us who work in healthcare, I mean, I'm part of a sibling caregiving group that's struggling with the care of 2 parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many of us around, and my family's fairly well educated. There are resources and money and time, but when it comes down to it, the first thing we say is we don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
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 So I think these conversations are still worth having, just to say, you're not in it by yourself.
Yeah.
And maybe if I find something that has worked for me and I share it with you, then that's how we keep each other afloat.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. It's sort of, it's going local. It's trying to find the resources that are local and frankly not free things. It's impossible to afford the professional care. And professional caregivers, honestly, are struggling too, and they're not making that much money. People can't afford to pay them much money, and then they have trouble living on so little money. It's a never-ending circle of despair. I'm going to say, quite honestly.
It's true. It's true. And I'm sure anybody who's listening that is a caregiver and working in healthcare would tell you the same thing, that they agree that
Yeah.
it is not a hopeful place. But together, we still have these conversations. So maybe, you know, on the podcast, we always advocate for change in the healthcare system, right? We know our system's broken, but people are dying every day. And they still need care every single day. So you have to come up with practical solutions, and staying connected, that helps.
Absolutely.
That absolutely helps. So the chaplain and the doctor, I can't wait to see this film. It's going to be so amazing. Tell me where listeners can find it. How can they share it? Are you screening anywhere? How can they connect with the film?
Well, here's a couple of things that people can do. And maybe, I don't know if you put anything out after this to give people the information if they don't have a chance to write it down, but people really should join our newsletter. And the way to do that, that's easiest, and you get a free resource guide around chaplaincy and spirituality, is to text the word caring to 66866. And that will sign you up for our newsletter. And it will also get you this free resource guide. So text caring to 66866. On our newsletter, you'll find out where we're going to be streaming, what festivals we're going to be in, what awards we've won. It's a very exciting time. We are also going to be planning a national theatrical screening tour in many cities around the country sometime over the next several months. You'll hear about that on the newsletter as well. And we are now scheduling events where people want to invite me to come and screen the film, either live or virtual, or to do my 1-hour keynote. There's two different programs. One is the film itself, which is about a 2-hour program. And the other one is to do the keynote, which has several clips and scenes in it from the film. And that's an hour. And we're really looking for hosts to invite us to come and share the film with them. So the way to reach us around that is info@realmedicinemedia.org. That's REEL medicinemedia.org.
Well, I'll have links and the instructions for how to text caring to subscribe to the newsletter. I'll put all of that in the show notes so the listeners will be able to connect with you.
And Helen, one more thing people can do is follow us on social media, which is @JessicaZitter on all channels.
Awesome. I'll include that as well. Jessica, what gives you joy in your career?
People, connections, holding someone's hand, making them feel heard, making them feel cared about. That's what gives me joy.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for your time today. Thrilled to have you back on the show again. It was great to see you.
So great to see you too.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes, and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.